Okay, so I'm going to call to order agenda adoption, and we'll start with the invocation and then the Pledge of Allegiance. Are we going to do roll call first? Okay, roll call.
Here.
Here.
I'm present.
Here.
Do we have any public comment?
Can I make a motion to adopt the agenda?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we pass 5-0. And now we will move on to the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Did we get someone for the invocation? We had someone and then they didn't come at the last minute.
All right.
Do we have any
First-
volunteers?
First one to volunteer. Come on, guys. Invocations.
Quick little prayer.
Anyone? Going once? Going
Those
twice?
of you running for office should take advantage of this public opportunity.
Yes.
Come on.
Come on, Barbie George. Come on up here.
And then Raina, maybe you could do the, right here.
Up at the dais.
And then, yep. Then Raina, we're going to get her up here for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, perfect.
Go get him, girl.
If we can all bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we come before you with open and humble hearts, giving you thanks first and foremost for the gifts that you have given us, Lord. I ask that you take charge of this evening, for you to be amongst us, Lord, and that your will be done within all of the lives here, and basically for us to keep our focus on what is the meaning of all of this here is our children. And we ask you to give us guidance, wisdom in all things. And we leave this meeting in your capable hands, Lord. And we give you all honor, all power, all praise forever and ever. In your name, Lord, amen.
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 Excuse me, can I have you state your name for the record? Thank you.
My name is Barbara George.
Thank you. Okay, and Raina, would you come up and give our invocation, please?
No, our
Yes.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I mean, our pledge of allegiance. Thank you.
And you may stand if you'd like.
Everyone, please stand and face the flag. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So at this point, I'm going to transfer the meeting to our moderator, but let me introduce him first. We have Senator Bob Huff as the forum moderator, and actually, you know what? I'm going to let Tim Shaw do the introduction. Fantastic. Trustee Shaw.
Thank you. I had the good opportunity in my life to work for Senator Huff as a member of his staff for 7 years. So I'm going to, when we were in need of a moderator for our forum, I said, I know the perfect person, Senator Huff. So Bob Huff served on the Diamond Bar City Council for 9 years and was mayor. Well, you were mayor twice, right? 2 different times as mayor. But then went on to serve in the legislature for 12 years. From 2012 to 2015, he was the Senate Minority Leader, working with the governor and the 3 other legislative leaders to hammer out budgets, statewide bonds, and other important legislative action. And the entire time he served in the legislature, he was on the Education Committee in both the Assembly and the Senate for 12 years. And many of those years, he was the vice chair of the Senate Education Committee, along with the very capable chair of the Education Committee, Senator Gloria Romero. And they are both here with us this evening, and we're a great a team leading education in California for a long time. So education accomplishments include working collaboratively as a joint author on the Parent Trigger Law, extending twice the school choice program known as District of Choice. And he always worked to support charter schools and passed the Heritage School legislation that legalized after-school education and cultural programs. Prior to Senator Huff's legislation, these after-school programs were being closed by the state because they were categorized as illegal daycare centers and not educational programs. So counted among his most important achievements, Senator Huff passed a bill that allowed non-medical volunteers, like teachers and school staff, to administer foolproof, life-saving medication to children having epileptic seizures while at school. Senator Huff received recognition from over 40 organizations for his work that positively impacted their members in the state. Following Senator Huff's retirement from the state Senate in 2016, he and his wife, May, formed a consulting firm, Huff Strategies, LLC, where they specialize in government relations, community outreach, and business development. So why don't you come on up, Senator Bob Huff.
Welcome, Senator Huff. No, we don't have.
You got it off already, right? Let's see. No light, mic active. Very good. Important safety clue. When you're in a new microphone, you got to learn what's on and what's off. I found that very helpful up in the legislature. So thank you, Tim, for that recitation of things. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and to be filling in for Scott Baugh. I know he got drawn elsewhere, but I appreciate the opportunity to be back in front of friends and talking about education, which has been a passion of mine. Let me just say a couple of things. It's a pleasure particularly to see Senator Romero because she served as chair of the Senate Education Committee and I was vice chair. And, you know, we kind of changed the world those couple of years. We got a lot of good things done, reaching across the aisle. And I might say it'd be helpful if they would figure out how to do that again. See, okay, sorry. Mr. Kiley, excuse me, Assemblymember Kiley. I was told I could speak candidly here, so you know, friendly audience.
Yes, you can.
Anyway, let me talk a little bit about the format of what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to have a few comments from me. We're doing that now. But we'll have the panel. I'll introduce them. I'll read them. They're probably longer than what Tim read about me. We'll have opening remarks, 12 minutes per panelist. Then we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to begin a round-robin session, which will have 6 minutes per trustee. They'll ask the panel questions, and we'll hopefully wrap that up within 6 minutes. We'll take a break, and then we're going to repeat it, only we're going to have closing comments at that point. So, and then I'll turn it back over to the board president. So, having said all that, introductions. Senator Gloria Romero is a forceful advocate for education reform and parental school choice. She is a former California State Senator from East Los Angeles and is a founder executive director of the charter schools. Gloria has been consistent in her emphasis that California cannot fully compete in the 21st century economy if we fail to close the achievement gap and create an educational system that puts students first and fosters for students. Upon her election to the state Senate, she was recognized as one of the hardest working members of the legislature, I will vouch for that, and quickly rose to leadership positions. She was elected by her peers to serve as Senate Democrat Caucus Chair and a Senate Majority Leader, the first woman to hold that leadership position in the history of the California State Senate. Prior to serving in the Senate, she held the post of Majority Whip in the California State Assembly from 1998 to 2000 and served on the LA Community College Board of Trustees from 1995 to 1998, and the Los Angeles Elected Charter Reform Commission in 1998. Additionally, she held the post of California Director of Democrats for Education Reform, a political action committee dedicated to making reforms in the Democratic Party. Romero served as chair of the Senate Education Committee, the Senate Budget and Fiscal Review Subcommittee on Education, and the chair of Public Safety, making her one of the most influential voices on education policy in California. She believes that education is the civil rights issue of our time. Senator Romero is known as a tenacious reformer, willing to call out her own political party when it impedes progress. She writes on education reform and politics and teaches courses on education and politics. Please give a welcome to Senator Romero. Our second panelist is Walter H. Myers III. Professor Myers is considered by the board to be a subject expert in education curriculum and parental rights advocacy. He is a frequent spokesperson on education reform in charter schools and the rights of parents to direct the upbringing of their children. As an advocate for parental choice in schools, he firmly believes in classical education curriculum for K-12 grade levels. Walter is an adjunct faculty member at Biola University in the Master of Arts in Science and Religion program, teaching on Darwinism, evolution, and design. He serves importantly as a board member of the Discovery Institute, a Seattle-based think tank that promotes thoughtful analysis on local, regional, national, and international issues. He's a regular contributor to the Discovery Institute Scholarship Mission. The Discovery Institute is home to an interdisciplinary community of scholars and policy advocates dedicated to the reinvigoration of traditional Western principles and institutions and the worldview from which they issued. Discovery Institute has a special concern for the role that science and technology play in our culture and how they can advance free markets, illuminate public policy, and support the theistic foundations of the West. Myers earned a BS in mathematics and computer science and master's in philosophy at Talbot School of Theology, Biola University. Walter's an expert on curriculums that empower students and parents for the 21st century. Please give a warm welcome to our next panelist is Lance Izumi. Lance Izumi is Senior Director of the Center for Education at Pacific Research Institute. He's written and produced books, studies, and films on a wide variety of education topics. Most recently, he is the author of the 2021 book, The Homeschool Boom, Pandemic Policies and Possibilities, and the 2019 book, Choosing Diversity, How Charter Schools Promote Diversity Learning Models and Meet the Diverse Needs of Parents and Children. He's the two-term president of the Board of Governors of the California Community Colleges, the largest system of higher education in the nation, and served as a member of the board from 2004 to 2015. From 2015 to 2018, Lance chaired the board of directors of the Foundation for California Community College, the official nonprofit that supports the community college system. Lance served as a commissioner on the California Post-Secondary Education Commission and as a member of the United States Civil Rights Commission's California Advisory Committee. Lance received his Juris Doctorate from the University of Southern California School of Law, his Master of Arts in Political Science from the University of California at Davis, and his Bachelor of Arts in Economics and History from the University of California at Los Angeles. Please welcome Lance Izumi. Our next panelist is Ricardo Soto. Ricardo Soto oversees the legal, facilities, and special education teams at the California Charter Schools Association. They had the initial CCSA, but I wanted to spell it out for everybody there. He provides general legal counsel to the association and advises the association in relation to legal strategies targeted to support the association's statewide and regional advocacy efforts, facilities and special education advocacy, the membership, the charter school community, and the association's initiatives and strategic objectives. Prior to CCSA, Ricardo served as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary in the U.S. Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights. In his position, Mr. Soto provided senior leadership concerning enforcement, policy, and operational activities. From 2005 to 2007, Ricardo served as Assistant Secretary and Legal Counsel in the Office of the Secretary of Education for California, where he advised the Secretary of Education and Governor's Office on legal and policy issues related to elementary, secondary, and higher education. Ricardo served as in-house counsel for the San Diego. Did I say something? Excuse me. I can see the light thing up. That means I'm off. Ricardo served as Assistant Secretary, we already went through that, where he served as Secretary of Education, Governor's Office. Here we go. Ricardo served as House Counsel for the San Diego Unified School District. He was also counsel with the law firm of Best and Krieger in San Diego, where he represented charter schools, school districts, and community colleges. Ricardo started out his legal career at California Rural Legal Assistance in Oceanside and represented migrant farm workers in education and employment issues. Ricardo graduated from the University of Wisconsin Law School and Marquette University. Ricardo is a native of Chicago and a lifelong Chicago sports fan. Well, in spite of the last part, please give a warm welcome to Ricardo. And our final panelist we're pleased to have here tonight with his busy schedule is Assemblymember Kevin Kiley. Kevin Kiley was elected to the California State Assembly in 2016 and has twice been reelected by substantial margins. In the 2020 election, he received more votes than any Republican in California history. The son of a special education teacher, Kevin began his career as a high school teacher in inner city Los Angeles, where he chaired the English department and led his students to significant academic gains. In 5 years in the legislature, Kevin has authored groundbreaking new laws on freedom of speech, artificial intelligence, privacy, criminal justice reform, and protections for sexual assault victims, along with introducing the most significant school choice legislation in recent years. For his work advancing economic freedom, in 2020, he was named the National Legislator of the Year by the Association of Independent Workers. Kevin holds a bachelor's degree from Harvard, a law degree from Yale, and a master's in secondary education from Loyola Marymount. He's also served as an adjunct professor at McGeorge School of Law. Please give a warm welcome to Assemblymember Kevin Kiley. Okay, so I'm going to make a few comments right now, and then we're going to get started on our 12 minutes per panelist, so you guys can take a break and think about it. I just wanted to say that in my 12 years in Sacramento on the Education Committee, I was fascinated with charter schools because we saw so many graphs about, education performance, and they were dismal, and they needed more money. The solution was always more money, and yet charters tended to do more with less. And just so we understand, a charter is a contract, and they're actually held accountable for performance. I like that. I like accountability. Regular public schools don't like accountability. We instituted the local control funding formula in 2012 so that we had heard from, legal folks, scholars, that if we just gave more money to the poor districts, they would perform better. So we've piled a lot of money in since that time, and their performance has stayed static or gone down. And the reason being, we don't really pay for good education. We subsidize bad education. And there is a difference. Charters, on the other hand, are held accountable. And so they don't get startup funding. They don't get facilities funding. They do get the teacher funding that follows. But if they don't do their job, they go out of business. If our public schools don't get out of business, again, we give them more money. So there's just sort of a fundamental difference. And I've been a big fan. I was pleased under Governor Schwarzenegger to get some more funding for charter schools. And we now, I think the latest statistic is 1 out of 9 students in California attends a charter school. Parents clearly like choice, and charters give them something they can't find in their traditional schools. So having said that, let's go ahead and start. And I'm not sure how I should start, but I guess I have the microphone. So Lance, I think we'll start with you and just work across that way and end up with Assemblymember Kiley. That's all right? You got 12 minutes. Oh, and by the way, I specifically asked if we have a timekeeper. Who's the timekeeper here?
That'll be me.
No, that would be Tim. Okay. So he's going to jump up and down. How are you
I'll
going to
yell
let
at
him
you.
know?
No.
How are you going to let him know when he's getting to the end of his time?
I'll just say time. How's that?
Okay.
Give him a 1 minute warning.
Okay.
Make sure you see his eyes, right? I know most of these guys up here, and they give them a microphone, they can get a little engaged.
All right.
So, Lance, please take it away. And
Well, thanks
welcome.
very much, Bob. I really appreciate that. First of all, I want to say how much it was a joy to work with you all the years that you were in Sacramento. I mean, you and I, were, working arm in arm in so many issues. So it was a real joy to be able to, be in the trenches with you, fighting the good fight, and also with Senator Romero as well. Those were the good old days. And so I want to thank all the board, as well for organizing this incredible forum, bringing so many people together and to talk about something extremely important. We've talked a little bit about, charter schools and why they're great. There are lots of reasons why we should all support charter schools. But what I'm going to be talking about is the diversity of learning models that charter schools offer. I think that one of the myths that comes up about charter schools is that, there's only one way that charter schools, deliver educational services, deliver learning to students, and nothing could be further from the truth. Charters not only differ from the regular public schools, they differ very much from each other. And so I wrote a book, which that Bob mentioned, Choosing Diversity, How Charter Schools Promote Diverse Learning Models and Meet the Diverse Needs of Parents and Their Children. And it looks at different types of charter schools. And what I want to talk about are some of those different types that are here in California. For example, one of the myths that that people believe about charter schools is they cream the crop of students, that they cherry pick the best students, and that's why they may perform well, when nothing could be further from the truth. For example, the first chapter in my book is on Life Learning Academy, which is located on Treasure Island in San Francisco. And they destroy this myth of cherry picking because they actually educate the hardest to educate, the most at-risk kids in the state. Many of these students at the academy are former dropouts from the regular public school system. One student named Micah had dropped out for nearly a year from his previous traditional public high school before coming to Life Learning Academy, and he told me that he didn't have any goals and that things just looked bleak, before he came to Life Learning Academy. In addition to many of the dropouts, many of the students at the academy are also homeless, and they often come from broken families that are torn by financial and personal upheaval. They're trying to escape abusive, violent, crime-ridden, or drug-infested environments. And Terry Delaney, who's the Academy's executive director, told me, we get kids that no one else wants, and the kids who are lost in a big school system. And one homeless student said, when you're homeless, you're always worrying about where you're going to sleep, what you're going to eat. And to address the needs of such homeless students, the Academy used its flexibility inherent as a charter school to build a dormitory, which made it the only publicly funded school in California to offer on-campus housing. Terry Delaney told me that I want a home where kids can wake up in the morning, feel safe, come out the door into their school, and they can stay here as long as they need to. That dormitory has had an incredibly positive impact on the students' attendance, on their academic performance, and on their behavior. The Academy also employs a wide range of innovative techniques to address the individual needs of their students. I think one of the problems we see with the regular traditional public schools is the one-size-fits-all mentality, that everything is cookie cutter. Everybody has to adhere to the same program. Whereas at this school, as so many other charter schools, you have individualized learning plans that are tailored to each student's particular needs and circumstances. The school identifies the strengths of each student and then builds upon individualized strategies for students to address their strengths, and also compensatory strategies that allow the students to address their weaknesses. So this school integrates traditional academics with hands-on activities and ties this classroom experience to concrete workforce and life skills so that students can recognize the practical value of coursework. That's one of the problems that students have and why they drop out, is that they don't see why they're doing what they're doing in school. But here at Life Learning Academy, that combination has made the Academy a national model for serving the most at-risk student population in this nation. And they have relationships with dozens of employers to provide work experience for its students, and their workforce development program offers internships and paid employment for students. So the bottom line is that Life Learning Academy is helping these highly at-risk students succeed in the classroom and in life, which is why 9 out of 10 of the Academy's students graduate, 3/4 of its students end up in higher education, and virtually all of its students either end up in college or with a full-time job at the time of graduation. I also produced a film on Life Learning Academy, and I interviewed a number of students on camera. And one of those students I interviewed was a young man named Carlos. There was a lot of violence in Carlos's life before he came to the academy. But in a really poignant moment on camera, he said that that charter school had literally saved his life. That is why we need the innovation of charter schools, and shows what they're capable of doing for the children that they are serving. Another myth that people have about charter schools, again, is that they only serve urban communities, when in reality, charter schools are all over our state. For example, one of the best charter schools in the state is a rural charter school out in Kern County called Grimway Academy. And Grimway Academy serves kids who are mostly either immigrants themselves or they're the sons and daughters of immigrants. And when I visited Grimway for my book, I interviewed 4 fourth graders. I interviewed Stacy, Noe, Edgar, and Kaylin, who had been there at the school for a number of years. And I asked them, why did they come to Grimway Academy? And 3 of the kids, Stacy, Noe, and Edgar, all said that their parents sent them to Grimway Academy because their parents were worried about their safety at their previous regular public school. Edgar, for example, described an incident at his previous regular public school when a man came onto campus, tried to get into the office, was chased by the police, and was eventually shot. Listening to Edgar's voice and looking at his facial expression as I was interviewing him, and he told his story, underscored what a lasting impression that incident made on that child. He was acutely aware of safety measures like locked gates. He said that he liked Grimway Academy because he feels that the school is more secure and it allows him to focus on learning. So it cannot be stressed strong enough that these children feel safe at their new charter schools, and regardless of academic performance issues, and charter schools do improve the performance of kids, parents should be able to choose the school for their kid solely on whether that school provides a safer environment for their child. Also, too, I went to other charter schools. For example, talking about this theme of diversity, choosing diversity. Charter schools are not just diverse from other charter schools, as I said. They may actually be diverse from within themselves. Many charter schools actually serve as umbrellas, and there may be individual academies located on their charter school premises that address different needs for different kids. So, for example, I went to Natomas Charter School in Sacramento, and they have 5 different academies that have different focuses. They have, for example, a academy that focuses on the performing and fine arts, and they have an academy, for example, that works with homeschoolers. And so I interviewed a student named Allie who attended the Performing and Fine Arts Academy, and she told me how she blossomed at the Fine Arts Academy at Natomas Charter School, and that she found out that she was actually good at art. She was able to discover her love of painting, ceramics, and writing. And her senior project, and I have a photo of her senior project, she made this unbelievable mural of a seascape and painted it in the counselor's office. And so if you ever get there, it's a beautiful thing to see. And she said that her education at the school made her a different person, and that because it addressed her individual needs, that she would not have had those needs addressed had she attended a regular public school. And so Natomas Charter School also, and I know I'm running out of time, but I will just say that their homeschool academy, and I've written another book called The Homeschool Boom, which is on this phenomenon of homeschooling in the United States. And it in the United States, there are probably double the amount of homeschoolers now than before the pandemic. And in certain communities, the number of homeschoolers have quintupled, like, for example, in the African-American community, where you have perhaps 3% before the pandemic to now 16 to 18% of the community is now homeschooling their children. And at Natomas Charter School's Homeschool Academy, they get the opportunity to both homeschool their kids and also send their kids part of the time to a class at the campus, whether it may be art or drama or forensic medicine, veterinary medicine, foreign languages. They have that opportunity to have a few days in class, but also spend the rest of the time homeschooling their child. Parents also get the opportunity to check out curriculum, the curriculum library that the school maintains, so that they are not, again, tied to the one-size-fits-all that a regular public school might offer. There's a wide variety of different curriculum that these schools can offer to meet the individual needs of the child at that school. So,
1 minute.
So I would just say that, and I might get into some of this in my closing, is that charter schools fill an incredible niche, that especially for kids who have been failed by the regular public schools, and oftentimes for no reason because of the evilness or anything like that. It's just the way the structures of the regular public schools are set up. They're not set up to address a lot of these individual needs of the kids. Charter schools are set up that way. They have the flexibility to do this. They have the opportunity to give people wider ranging choices. And because of that, that is why they do better. If you want to know why charter schools do better, that is why they do better.
Awesome. Thank you, Lance. We appreciate it. Let's give him a round of applause. Not only do the speakers appreciate that, but it gets your blood circulating a little bit. So, second speaker, Walter Myers, if you would please make your presentation.
Testing. Okay, I think we got it here. Thank you to the Board of Education, and thank you so much, Senator Huff, for moderating today. I'm going to speak from a recent article I published, along with some additional notes that weren't in the article. It was published in a Real Clear Education website just this past week. And the name of the article was Addressing Misconceptions of Charter Schools. Since our humble beginnings in 1992 with City Academy in St. Paul, Minnesota, charter schools have expanded to 44 other states as well as the District of Columbia, and they now enroll over 3.4 million students, roughly 8% of all students nationwide. But while charter schools have been around for 30 years, many Americans remain unfamiliar with or confused about the basic concept. What many don't understand is that charter schools are public schools, funded by federal and state funds, but they're privately run. Charter schools serve as an alternative to public schools that often fail students, as is the case in virtually every major urban area with predominantly minority children. In many cases, charters deliver significantly better educational outcomes than public schools in terms of standardized test scores and graduation rates. The advantage of charter schools is that they're exempt from state and local regulations to a substantial degree, giving them the flexibility and autonomy to innovate and meet the needs of students. In exchange for this freedom, these schools are held publicly accountable, as Senator Huff noted, to their charter, generally a legislative contract with the state or district. Charter schools are reviewed periodically by their granting entity. If the conditions of the charter aren't met, their authorization can be revoked. A common misconception about charter schools is that they siphon off the best students from public schools and leave the remaining students to suffer in underperforming schools, as Lance just mentioned. This isn't the case, however. Charter school admission is based on an open lottery system, which provides equal access to all students until capacity limits are reached. Now, it is true that parents who are more involved in their children's education will be more likely to pursue enrollment in a charter school, but their chances for success are the same as all other parents who apply. Now, some charter schools do choose to serve more specifically the needs of their communities. Charter schools can prioritize admissions to students who live in a particular area or district they would like to serve. Other charters indicate specific missions. For example, the Holla, H-O-L-L-A school in the Rockwood community of Portland, Oregon, states that its mission is to serve Black, brown, and indigenous youth. This does not mean only minority students can attend the school, as admission is, by law, open to all, since charter schools cannot discriminate even if they target specific communities. Another common misconception about charter schools is that they drain money from traditional public schools. This doesn't make much sense, in my view, since charter schools are, as I noted earlier, they're public schools. If a traditional school is losing enrollment to a charter school, then it's for a reason, and it should be a wake-up call to that school that they need to improve. Nonetheless, in most statements, adjustments are made to compensate districts for enrollment losses to charter schools. And besides, the mission of charter schools has always been to provide an alternative within the public school system itself, often a sorely needed alternative, considering the one-size-fits-all approach typical of traditional public school systems. Now, I'd like to be clear that charter schools are no panacea. Not all are equally successful with respect to educational outcomes, and not all are right for all students. As with any schooling decision, parents must determine what is best for their children. Rather than a competitor to traditional public schools, charters are more of a model for how public school systems could be more responsive to student needs while also producing better outcomes. Since they can lose their authorization if they don't effectively serve their students, charters are accountable in ways that traditional public schools, even failing ones, are not. Many parents would love to have a charter school alternative to their underperforming local public school, but in some states, they limit parental options. In California, teacher unions make huge campaign contributions to legislators who cripple charter schools by imposing onerous regulations and giving them considerably less funding than traditional public schools. In California, where teachers can gain tenure after 2 years, pay increases automatic regardless of performance, and full pension benefits starting at age 62, there's little incentive to innovate. Charter schools, by contrast, attract teachers who favor merit pay increases based on student success in the classroom and retirement plans that resemble those of other private entities, 401k, 401b. Finally, there's another reason parents seek charter schools that has little to do with traditional school academic performance. Traditional schools, particularly those in California, have become laboratories for content that many parents feel is either objectionable or inconsistent with their values, such as critical race theory and age-inappropriate sexual and mental health content and surveys that include asking children about their sexual histories. Often, this type of content is hidden from parents, done without their consent. The truth is, charter schools do more with less and focus solely on their mission, which is to deliver academic achievement, outperforming their traditional public school counterparts. If traditional public schools want to retain students, instead of complaining, they should learn from successful charter schools and seek to raise the quality of education they provide so that parents won't seek alternatives. Until that happens, concerned parents will continue to gravitate to charter schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. I appreciate it. Senator Romero, you're up.
Okay, thank you so much. It's an honor to see you once again, Senator Huff, and to thank you to the board and really to this very distinguished panel. According to your website, there are 35 diverse charter schools in Orange County, and you serve about 21,000 kids. Most people know that this Board of Education, this County Board of Education, is one of the most pro-charter school boards in the state of California. And so, of course, that means a number of challenges, including as well too in the political arena, because it means, of course, that we've always got to be on our toes. There's always means by which some nefarious characters will try to shut down charters at different levels, whether it be the school district or the county boards. I want to applaud what you're doing and urge you to keep fighting that good fight. I thought what I would do tonight is, rather than talking about the merits of charter schools, which I'm a strong advocate, supporter of written laws, et cetera, with Senator Huff, I will advocate. I thought I would talk a little bit about what it feels like to be somewhat in the weeds. Since having been in the legislature, working on political reforms, as you know, I have started charter schools, most recently here, Explore Academy, Orange County, very innovative. We're excited about that project going forward. So I thought I would talk a little bit about what you can do perhaps to take it to additional levels. Some of the experiences that I think we need to work on, and I would encourage this board to really take a look at it. Let me start with, because one of your goals is to educate parents. So we typically will go to a website. I would urge you, it's a wonderful website, but I will tell you, I have a PhD and it took me a while to find information about charters. It's not an easy process. And so what I found finally, I had to push a bunch of tabs and everything, and I found charter schools, unlike other districts, they simply say charter school division. I found charters nested under something called community partnerships. Well, that sounds great. I mean, they are, but it's like, what is that? So one thing I would encourage you is to get out your good information and really to pull that out. I'm not necessarily saying you have to have a separate division, but certainly on the website, just to simply list, to put charter schools, petitions, et cetera. And then one thing that I would strongly recommend, and this is something, and I don't often give praise to LA Unified, but you're going to hear about LA Unified a bit tonight. They actually post not only the listing of all charter schools, but actually the petitions, so that this is helpful to others going forward. We can take a look at it, review it, and also parents can take a look at the model. So I would strongly encourage you to list the approved petition. You might even want to include the material revisions as well. I think that would go a long way for parent understanding. Other things that I think are very important in the actual charter process itself. Of course, we're always happy when we get the vote and we're approved, but I will tell you, having been in the weeds, it is not a happy process. I've been in 3 different counties, have experienced this, and even in this very pro-charter county of Orange County, it's been really difficult at times. It's sad to say that charters, the original intent of charters was really to come up with innovation, et cetera, and to enable, parents, teachers, community groups to also really begin to develop charters. Looking back on it now, it's become very legalistic. it really is something where it's become a niche industry. And those are some of the, I believe, legitimate criticisms about charter schools. It takes money, a lot of money. You have to have the bureaucraties, the legalese, the consultants. I am appalled at when I've heard even, some of the industries that have cropped up around charter schools, where I heard not too long ago that one consultant was going to charge a group that was interested in starting a petition here in Orange County $100,000 to write the petition. That is madness, and that was not the spirit or the intent of the law. So I think the more that you can do to really make it feasible, and I know you can't do everything, but you kind of look out for it and maybe think about resources overall. Maybe there's some way to also develop perhaps a donor fund or something, or to bring charter folks together with vendors. CCSA, of course, is always here to help. But I think that the more that we can look at that, because what we're doing is we're really pricing people who would want to do a charter school out of essentially the market. I think in Northern California, I've seen a lot more sort of rank and file, everyday people who have had charters. I think it's become much more difficult here in Orange County, and I say that with a heavy heart. Again, too, in terms of the legal issues, even with the last charter petition that we ran through Orange County, ultimately we did get it approved, and your staff is really great to work with. But we had to really battle on the legal issue, the interpretation. And so we hired one of the top-notch firms, and I would go to them, Young, Minnie, and Core, over and over. But you know what? You pay for what you get. It's a good, strong team. Thousands and thousands and thousands of debt, basically, before you can even hope to start. So it is something that I've experienced, and I would encourage you to really think about that when there are different interpretations of the law. And sometimes the law is gray, I get that, but I would, really urge you to take a look at that process of the argumentative stage of the interpretation of law. The MOUs you've heard from me before, I would urge you, get rid of those. There is nothing in charter law in the state of California that mandates MOUs. And I have always felt if it's not law, don't invent new law at the local level, because all you're doing, in my opinion, is you're putting barriers in place. It's that nose under the, what is it? The nose under, yeah, the camel's nose under the tent. Thank you. And you start giving up your right to a law. There's nothing. If you want to have MOUs, then go to Sacramento. I think, and then once again, you got to bring in the lawyers. And we love lawyers, but I don't want to pay for more lawyers once we've gotten approved. And some of those templates, I mean, they're 28 and 30 pages. I wrote law, but I'm not a lawyer. And so you have to hire the firm, you have to argue it out, et cetera. I just think I would park the, you could become the lead county that says, ya basta, it's over, we're not going to do it. And Assemblymember Kiley, if you're interested in making it, to force MOUs, then you can initiate that bill, but I doubt he's going to do that. So I would urge you to, and there's some way to kind of figure out, okay, let's sit down and just say, these are certain things that we can agree upon. So I would really urge that. Policies, oh my God. Okay, we got to file this policy and that policy and this policy and epicenter, and it becomes really bureaucratic. And so I would urge you, we oftentimes, behind closed doors, we say, read the charter, it's in the charter. So you may want to think about what has to be filed over and over, and can we just say go to pages 20 to 30, because we paid all that money, we wrote the charter, we argued for it, you approved us, and then all of a sudden we've got all this administrative stuff. I could say other stuff, but anyway, so I would urge that. So once we get approved then, I would also urge then to hold us more accountable. And I'm going to say this as a charter advocate. We have great charters, and even in the state of California here in Orange County, but I'm going to be honest, we have some pretty crappy charters too. Let's not make any mistake about it. I have seen charters approved and their academic outcomes, and I'm very strong on making sure that that it matters. I mean, we're putting ourselves up as, we are an alternative for the district, so why should we be operating if we are not doing as well in educating children? I believe in a healthy competition. And I do think, even though it's sometimes painful, you got to move a school, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But I would really urge us, if that school is not performing, it's the parents and the kids that are being shortchanged. So I would urge you to really scrutinize and take a look at these. And one way that you could do this as well is, recently I was on Home Depot, their website, and I was trying to figure out which dishwasher to order, and you have this comparison chart where you get to compare and contrast, and it's not just Home Depot, but a lot of them do it. So if they can do it, I would urge this board to start thinking about your own quote unquote dashboard, not mandated or anything like that, because the state dashboard on the Department of Education, it looks like a twister board with all those colors and nobody knows what it means. So you might just want to highlight, look, these are some of the scores, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. That way parents can compare. And you have great district schools. And I would encourage you that if there's a charter, maybe to take a geographic area and to kind of highlight, you've got this school and within a geographic area, maybe 2 miles, 3 miles, whatever you think is feasible, and just list them and sort of what they are, et cetera. And I think that could be really helpful to parents. And then I really urge people that, if you get a charter that's coming up for renewal, and I'll put it LA Unified. I remember I was sitting in the audience one time and charter after charter was being approved. And this is not exactly a charter-friendly board in LA, but I was thinking, oh my gosh, because those charter schools, if I were sitting on that board, I would have said, no way. The neighborhood school is much better than the charter, and why put that out? So it's something to think about. I do want to say as well, too, that I think, I'm going to be honest, I think it's a little bit easy to game the system here in Orange County because people know that Orange County is pro-charter. So once we get approved, there's sort of, you fall on, that, well, they're going to like us, they don't want to shut charters down, et cetera. I think it's important, if there's the mission and vision of a school, then hold them to it. For example, if you're going to do, if you, and I've experienced this as well, if we're starting a school for foster youth, how many foster youth do we have enrolled? If you've only got 8 kids or 10 kids out of 500, is it really meeting it? Or is it part of a gaming the system? Because what will happen is out in the real world, that's where charters get dinged. And so I think it's important to really hold that petition, kind of do what you said you were going to do. It sounds great on paper, no, go out and do it. And I think it's something important. Wokeness, as I heard you talk recently as well, it's creeping up in Orange County, and I would urge you to really take a look at that as well. I think it's important as well, too, and LA Unified, once again, they do this. If the school is sued, especially by, if there's a file of discrimination against a board member or the executive team, that is reported to LA Unified, along with documentation. I think that's important. And I think when you start looking at it, again, the lawyers get involved, but that's taxpayer dollars. And so I would urge this board to at least have some kind of mandatory reporting to you. This is something that is personal to me. In my career, I can legally say in my career, I have filed a claim of gender and age discrimination. I've written a book about it called Just Not That Likeable, The Price All Women Pay for Gender Bias, available on Amazon.com for anybody who might be interested. And it does talk a little bit about and especially in my case, experience of women in academia, in leadership, and in looking at some of these issues of leading while being a woman and sort of stereotyping, et cetera. So I think it's important to look at that. Fiscal issues are very real. I'll be honest, when we were trying to find a new facility for our charter, I won't name any names, but we ran across a few landlords who would identify a particular charter and just say, are you like them, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. They haven't paid the rent. I don't know the details, but it's issues that for other charters coming forward, we face that. So the sooner you deal with the fiscal issues, I think it really makes it a good point for all of us overall. And of course, finding a facility is very difficult. So that could be something as well too, as if the board could maybe compile a listing of available resources or schools that might be shutting down or areas, or even have relationships with realtors who might say these buildings are available. I think that would be really, really good.
Your time's up.
Okay, well then that's it overall, and thank you for the forum that you have. There's so much that can come out of this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate your comments. You always give thoughtful commentary, and that's really valuable. Ricardo Soto, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Just to reiterate, I wanted to thank the board for inviting California Charter School Association to present tonight. And much of what has already been said, I would, just support and ditto in terms of all the challenges and the strengths of charter schools. Both the challenges that they face, but also the strengths that they provide. I did want to just say that it's appropriate that we're having this conversation tonight. Tomorrow, September 21st, is actually the 30th anniversary of the California Charter School Act. So 30 years ago, the law was signed and enacted, and it's created a revolution to a certain extent for some communities and for some students and families that are in terms of their public education access. One of the things that is a challenge, especially in the political dynamics that charter schools face throughout the state of California, including in the legislature sometimes, is that folks forget what the purpose of and the goal of the Charter School Act was. And if you look at the Charter School Act, it's right there in the first section of the Education Code. And it was the intent of the legislature to create public schools that operate independently from the traditional school district system. One of the things that if you're, I'm a legal nerd, a Charter School Act nerd, one of the things that we talk about kind of, we say it all the time, it's called the Mega Waiver. And the Mega Waiver is a provision in the Charter School Act that essentially says that charter schools are exempt from all laws that are applicable to school districts, except for those that they specifically are required to follow. And much of those laws are in the Charter School Act, but occasionally we'll see other provisions of the Education Code that do incorporate or refer to charter schools that they have to that they have to comply with. And that is really the heart of kind of the charter school flexibility in California, is that they're exempt from the voluminous laws that apply to the traditional public school system. And it provides an opportunity for educators who are really focused on students and families to try to develop innovative programs, different instructional models and policies to serve their students, much like was described earlier tonight in terms of how they're doing it. But there's some additional goals that were articulated in the Charter School Act about what the legislature was trying to accomplish. And that includes improving pupil learning, as was stated earlier, increasing learning opportunities for all pupils, but with a special emphasis on expanding learning experiences for pupils who are identified as academically low performing. And this is really important. There's been mention by one of the county board members about restricting access to a public school based on zip code. Charter schools don't do that. Charter schools, any student in California can attend a charter school. I had a nephew that lived in Orange County. He attended a charter school in San Diego County. So that's the kind of flexibility that charter schools provide for serving students and families across the state. One of the other purposes of the Charter School Act was to encourage the use of different and innovative teaching methods. Professor Izumi has stated about the things that the schools that he studied have provided to the students that are desperate for opportunities to look for better school programs that support all their needs, not just the cookie cutter model that supports a standard or the perceived typical student. And then lastly, and this is one of the things that I think is often forgotten about the Charter School Act, it wasn't only designed to provide these unique opportunities to students and parents, but it was also passed to provide professional opportunities for teachers and educators to develop new and innovative models in serving students. Too often I've heard, I come from a family of educators, both on my wife's side, but I'm, in my immediate family. And, educators in some schools, in particular traditional public schools, are frustrated by the processes and the bureaucracy that they confront, in trying to do something different or unique for individual students. And so charter schools is a way, the charter school model is a way of offering professional opportunities for educators to kind of follow their passion and their hearts in serving students. Of course, charter schools provide expanded choice and provide a variety of options for them to serve families. But as has been mentioned consistently tonight, charter schools, because they're freed from the voluminous education code, the bottom line for them is how are they serving students? They're accountable to ensuring that students are making progress and that they're learning. As an organization, California Charter School Association, we take this commitment very seriously. We think that charter schools should be delivering higher quality educational options for families and students. And it's important, as Senator Romero mentioned, that if they're not meeting their objectives and their goals academically, and also just in terms of how they're serving students, then their authorizers, whether they be the county board or school districts, should be looking at not renewing them and letting students have other options and families have other options. And charter schools provide vigorous competition with the public school system. It's about trying to improve all education for all public school students. This is one of the areas that, public competition doesn't mean, you do your thing, we do our thing, whoever gets more students and parents wins. But it's also figuring out how to work together collaboratively. What are the innovations that charter schools are driving? And how can those innovations potentially be incorporated into the traditional public school system that serves most of the community and most of the families in an area? I wanted to just kind of wrap up my comments by saying a little bit about what does the landscape look like for charter schools? As Senator Huff mentioned, charter schools serve about 1 in 9 students, or approximately 700,000 students across the state. And if you look at the kind of the demographics of those students, it very much mirrors the traditional public school system population. So 56% of those students are low income, 52% are Latino, 15% are English language learners, 10% are students with disabilities, and then 7% are Black. And there's a lot of people think that charter schools are skimming. They're only targeting the best students or the high achieving students. But especially in some of our most challenged communities, the charter school students that attend those schools reflect the communities where those schools are located. So they're not really skimming. And in fact, a few years ago, we believed so much in the fact that charter schools are willing to serve any student that comes through the doors, that we incorporated into the Charter School Act that charter schools will take any student that comes to their door to be served. In Orange County, over 22,000 students are served by charter schools. And while we've seen a lot of growth in Orange County, the student population of charter schools in Orange County was 7,000 in 2010. Now it's over 22,000. Interestingly, Orange County, kind of saw that growth in a very over a longer period of time. Some other parts of the state, that growth was pretty exponential. But in Orange County, you're starting to catch up. And then finally, and I think you all know this, the Orange County Board of Education authorizes more charter schools in the county of Orange County than school districts combined. And that's a record I think that this board should be very proud of, in terms of making sure that if school districts aren't providing the kinds of options that students need, the county board will make sure that those options are offered. And then lastly, and I'll talk about this more in my final comments. There are lots of challenges that our charter schools still face. Senator Romero talked about several of them, the MOU facilities, but there are ways that the county board can lead on some of those challenges. By thinking of ways to provide more facilities, ensuring that there's funding equity for charter schools, and that there's not excessive overreach and oversight by school districts or by county staff concerning charter schools. Educators want the freedom to be able to serve their students, and that should be protected. Too often we see authorizers require MOUs or policies with charter schools that personally I don't think is permissible under law, but that also hamstrings how charter schools can serve their schools. I'll provide a little bit more information in my closing remarks about addressing some of these areas, but these are the areas that this county board should be leading on, so that you set the example of how county boards can really encourage and support not only charter schools, but the programs that that students and families need. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. And for our last panelist, we have Assemblymember Kiley, please.
Well, thank you very much for the chance to say a few words tonight and to join these outstanding panelists in discussing a matter of the highest importance to many students and families throughout California. I thought I'd give you just a sense of what it's been like inside the Capitol during the last several years, dealing with the wars over public education in this state. I've been in the legislature for just about 6 years now. I was on the Education Committee for 5 of those years. I believe I was vice chair of the Education Committee for 4 of them. Much like Senator Huff was vice chair of the Senate Education Committee. Unfortunately, I did not have anyone resembling Senator Romero to work with as chair. I would have loved that. But I thought I also want to just say, as kind of a couple prefatory remarks, to keep a sense of perspective as I discuss what we've been dealing with at the Capitol. I think it's, and I try to always keep in mind the perspective of the constituency that legislation is going to affect. And in this case, it's the charter school students and families and administrators and teachers and school leaders. And if you talk to any charter school leader, and there are several in this room I know, they'll tell you that their mentality is just one of what is next. What's next is going to come our way that's going to interfere with my ability to provide a quality education to the families that have opted in to the school that I'm running. It's just one thing after another that makes life more difficult. And then, the second thing is kind of the overarching political perspective on this, and it's been mentioned before that the fundamental issue here is the power of the teachers union, California Teachers Association, primarily. And to just kind of state the obvious, the reason that they don't like charter schools is that it's a threat to their business model. Their entire business model is to take a cut of every public school teacher's paycheck and then to use that money to elect politicians who will further advance that business model. While the reason charters are a threat to that business model is because unionization is optional for charters, where it's automatic for traditional public schools. So the CTA is 100% behind the attacks on charters that we get from the state capitol, and they cannot be reasoned with. They will stop at nothing, short of the total extinction of charter schools in the state of California. And so that's, I think just is the reality that we should be aware of in discussing these issues. So I'd break my kind of relatively short tenure at the Capitol into 3 phases when it comes to the nature of these battles over chartering. The first would be my first 2 years in 2017 and 2018 when Jerry Brown was still governor. Governor Brown, I did not agree with on a lot of things, and I didn't entirely agree with him on education or charter schools, but he, at the very least, was somewhat more favorable towards them than other governors have been. So there was, a sense that the worst impulses of the legislature were tamed by Jerry Brown's unwillingness to, do anything too extreme. So the legislature kind of took a more subtle approach in those years, which had been going on since before I got there, which was kind of the death by a thousand cuts approach, where every bill that imposed any sort of regulation on schools would automatically then be extended to charter schools. It was the re-regulation of charter schools, which of course undermines the entire premise of charter schools, which is this mega waiver. And so the idea was to chip away at the mega waiver bit by bit, and to interfere with that freedom that allows for the the diversity of offerings that charter schools provide. So O'Donnell, who is the chair of the Education Committee, every single bill that would come there, if it didn't apply to charter schools, they'd immediately put an amendment saying, this applies to charter schools. And if the chair of the committee says that he wants you to take an amendment, you have to take it. Otherwise, they're going to kill your bill, or they just won't even hear the bill. And so, that's kind of the strategy that they were pursuing, all the while waiting to take a more aggressive strategy when there was a change in personnel at the governor's office, which of course happened starting in 2019, and then it was kind of open season. So you had, a number of anti-charter bills that were introduced that year. What was it? 1505, 1506, 1507. Yeah, which took different approaches to this issue. These bills were condemned by civil rights groups throughout California. They were condemned by chapters of the NAACP and the Urban League. There were thousands and thousands of students and charter school parents who came to the Capitol to testify against them. By the way, they've since limited public testimonies. You can't do that anymore. They've limited it to 10 minutes because it would take hours. There are so many people there to speak out against these bills. At the end of the day, the most damaging one that made it through was 1505, which I'm sure that this board is very familiar with because among other things, it widened the discretion of school districts to deny charters by saying you could do so before there was specific reasons, that you had to cite in order to deny a charter petition. But this made it so you could just cite the financial impact on your district, and arguably that's the case in any charter. So it basically just gave districts carte blanche to deny charter petitions. And then the bill went after the role of county boards of education as well. And, some of the worst aspects of that were at least taken out by the time the bill passed the legislature. But the reason the county boards are a target is because in a lot of cases, of course, the county is the leading example of it. County boards are a lot more reasonable when it comes to decisions about charter petitions because there isn't quite the same inherent conflict of interest that a school district has, where you're, and I agree with the point that they're not competitors. We're talking about public schools here of one kind or another, but a lot of school districts don't really see it that way, especially those where the union has been successful in controlling the membership. There were a number of other bills dealing with charters that year, but those were really the main ones, and it was kind of like a new era where charter schools were under attack like never before. And then sort of the third phase would be when COVID began. And, immediately, the interests that opposed charter schools tried to seize the opportunity to advance that agenda. So it was a matter of weeks, I think, when UTLA, which is the largest CTA affiliate, United Teachers of Los Angeles, said we need a moratorium on charter schools. Like, what does that have to do with COVID? And it was the exact same thing they just had this massive strike for the year before when there was no COVID. And then they decided that COVID, was a reason to have a moratorium on charter schools as well. I think this was also in their sort of hostage note they put out with a list of demands before schools could reopen, saying no more charter schools. And so, and then we had what was one of the most despicable things that I think happened throughout this whole experience was that the legislature and Newsom hashed out this trailer bill that just kind of appeared without any warning, without any vetting, anything, that said we're going to deny, funding to growing charters or school districts. We're going to kind of get rid of this basic principle of, of per pupil funding. And of course, the story there was that schools have been shut down, and we were into the Zoom school era. And a lot of charters were doing a lot better with that, either because they had already had well-developed personalized learning platforms, or because they were more nimble and could respond to the demands of the moment, or maybe they just had a greater incentive because their families would go elsewhere if they didn't provide a good offering. So you had a lot of families that were enrolling in charter schools to get at least a modicum of a decent education for their kids. And so the response of the legislature is, oh, we need to stop that. We need to keep them trapped in their closed, failing local traditional school that isn't even offering Zoom school in the moment. Like, this is actually what they did. And so the governor signed the bill. There was a lawsuit that was led by John Adams, which is actually in my district. Assembly Discipline is featured in Lance's book, Choosing Diversity, as well as Margaret Fortune's schools, the Fortune family of schools. She said at the press conference announcing this that the whole reason she started her schools was to close the African American achievement gap, and this bill interfered with that. So long story short, they ended up changing it and mitigating the impacts of it to some degree, although there was still a lot of harms done by that bill. So, and there were a lot of things that happened. There was 1316, which we were just talking about, which was basically an existential threat to homeschool-based or independent study-based charters. That actually passed the Education Committee, but I believe died on the floor of the Assembly. By the way, I didn't mention, I was a high school teacher myself. As Senator Huff mentioned in the introduction, I was part of the Teach for America program, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. And on two separate occasions, a bill to ban Teach for America from the state of California has passed the Education Committee. The first time, the author, her name is Cristina Garcia, literally just put the words Teach for America in the bill and said you're not allowed to operate in California. It never passed the Assembly, but this just goes to show you the disposition of our Education Committee. And one of the reasons they don't like TFA, the teachers unions, is because a lot of the students are placed, or a lot of the teachers are placed at charter schools. So I see I'm nearing the end of my time. In terms of what do we take from this whole experience of the last couple years, I would say that there are new sort of opportunities that have opened up because you have a lot of parents throughout California who have gotten a real window into the dynamics that have been shaping our public education system and how it's really never about the kids when it comes to education politics in California. And I think that could be channeled in some really positive directions. I would love to see, reform when it comes to the authorizing process. I'd like to see a larger role for county boards of education. And I also think, as kind of a final point, maybe we could try to move towards school boards and districts actually operating more like charter schools do. In a perfect world, that would emanate from the state providing, much greater liberation from the lengthy education code and providing additional, points of accountability. But I think that what you're seeing a lot of school boards discover across the state is that, you don't necessarily need to take the approach of always following in the strictest possible way whatever the mandates are that come down from the state. District staffs are often very risk averse, and so they will kind of give you the most prescriptive possible set of recommendations, and on boards that are controlled by the unions, they'll simply just kind of rubber stamp those. Whereas we've seen in many school boards now across the state, and this board is a leading example of that, elected trustees saying, well, actually, no, we are elected representatives ourselves. We are representatives of the community. Our, obligation first and foremost is to respond to the community. And so that is going to be sort of, the way that we approach our role. And we will, of course, follow the law, but we'll search for whatever avenues we have available to serve our community and what our parents want in the process. And so I think that is the way that you're going to see a lot of newly reconstituted boards sometime soon approach their job as well.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Let's give him a warm applause. It's both disturbing and humorous listening to the chaos going on under the dome, and it sounds very familiar, doesn't it, Senator Romero? Our next portion of this will be what they call the round robin. I don't know who's the robin here, but we're gonna, each of you take 6 minutes and ask questions. And Tim, are you gonna time that too?
Sure.
You gonna time yourself? Do I need to
Yes, I
time?
will.
Yeah, actually, we'll just try to keep to it. And then following that, we'll have a break. But I'm gonna start with, excuse me, you need to go?
No, he wants to go.
Oh, you want to go first? Oh, I'm going to get, you're the rookie, so I'm going to let you think a little bit. You know, we'll start with Trustee Barkey, and we'll get to you. You're not going to be the last one to speak, so.
All right. So refresh me. I have so many minutes, and I can spread the questions amongst whomever I want.
Yeah,
Is
or
that-
you can talk for 6 minutes if you want.
No, I'd rather ask questions.
The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. All right, I'll go in reverse. So I'll start with Assemblyman Kiley. So we hear this so often from district board members that their hands are tied, they can't do anything about the restrictions. Yet I know that a lot of boards, especially in your part of the state, are doing differently. What is your recommendation to local board trustees? I know we have quite a few candidates in the room, and what can they do once elected to meet the needs of the community that elected them while staying within the law? How far can they go, or what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because that was sort of the point I was ending on there, and this gives me a chance to expand on it some. So in my area, I'm from Placer County, and we actually had some great people that came in and were a part of some of our biggest school boards in early 2021, and they sort of had a commitment to getting schools open. And so they, warded off every obstacle the state threw in their path, and opened their schools as early as any place in the state. And then, kind of to your point more directly, when it came to the issue of masks in school, which obviously was a matter of great concern to many parents throughout California, the sort of thinking was, well, the state has mandated this, and if you don't do it, then you're going to be in big trouble, and maybe you'll lose your funding, and maybe you'll lose your insurance. So you just need to do what the state says. Well, we had one district in my assembly district that said, well, we're going to do our own thing here, and passed a resolution that said, we're going to give the option to each student/parent to make the decision that's right for them. And so I think that they felt they were able to word that in a way that fell within, at least their interpretation of the law. Other districts took a different approach, but ultimately got to the same endpoint, like in El Dorado Union School District, also an area that I represent. They said that, well, okay, this is the policy, but there's going to be no consequence if you don't wear the mask. And so that was effectively a mask choice school as well. And, by the way, I'll say that after this happened, you had dozens of other districts that also adopted the same approach, and the governor rolled back the statewide order after that. So sometimes you can get change happen from the local level, and it will percolate up. And so I guess that, the broader point here is, as I was saying before, there's, it's in the nature of the administration to always be, conservative in its interpretation of what is required, or to, to mitigate or to minimize legal risk and so forth, and which is not even necessarily a criticism. In some sense, that is properly their job. But you as an elected board member, your role is to make decisions that take into account all perspectives, right? And I think that you have too many, boards where the elected members are really just there to serve particular interests, and so they only consider that one perspective, and they don't balance that perspective against other perspectives, against other possible interpretations of the law, against what the community is looking for. And so I think, what I am really encouraged by is I see more board members who are stepping into that role and saying, and saying, I am an independently elected representative for this community. I'm not just someone who's there to rubber stamp decisions that are made by bureaucrats in Sacramento. And so like specific examples of where this might come up going forward is you mentioned some of the curriculum that we have in our schools, which is pretty appalling to a lot of people in certain cases around sex ed, around this new ethnic studies or CRT or whatever you want to call it, mandate that has been passed that's now going to be implemented at the district level. And so I think that you're going to have some districts that say, well, we want to be really careful here just to do exactly what the state wants us to do. So they're going to take the model curriculum and adopt it wholesale and, you know, search for whatever extra resources they can provide to make the state even happier and to make it even more extreme. You'll have districts that'll do that. Whereas you'll have other districts that will say, well, let's see if we can, you know, work within the bounds of the law, but tailor this into something that is actually right for our community and that actually, you know, serves the interests of kids.
Thank you. Those comments, I think, are so important because that's such a huge question, and not just here in Orange County, but across the state. And I've had board member candidates reach out to me and elected trustees saying, what do we do? You know, our community is really upset and we don't think we have any power. So thank you. I remember you made similar comments when we testified at Test and Unified several months ago. So I'm glad that we have a national or at least a statewide audience listening tonight, and I hope your comments will encourage them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next will be Trustee Williams, followed by Mr. Valdez.
Again, reach out and a big thank you for being here, each and every one of you. This is very successful, very entertaining, wonderful information. I'm learning each and every one of you has said something that has touched me. I'm going to throw out a question. It'll be for all 5 of you. And it has to do with an issue that this board will be facing in the next meeting. In that one of our charter schools that's coming for approval through us, we've had parents come up to us and complain about the wokeness, about the inculcation of critical race theory, about teaching of Marxism. And it's not from an academic historical perspective, but it's inculcating aspects of Marxism and indoctrination. It's more of a political perspective. And there's lots of other concerns with the curriculum that parents have been complaining about. My question, and I'll throw it out to anyone who wants to answer. Our board stands, at least I do, and I probably speak for many of my colleagues here. We're for direct academic instruction. We're for inculcating facts and knowledge into kids and not political indoctrination. Being that that is my governing philosophy, I believe every single person here, does this board have the right to say no to this charter? Gloria, could you start opening? What would you do? Parent comes up to you, they're unhappy with teaching of the pronouns. Our kids don't even know what adverbs and sentence structure or phonemic words. A pronoun, is that she, him? Is that he, him? What should our board do if we're stand against this and a public charter school wants to implement this curriculum?
I'm actually going to flip it. I'm going to say, look, a charter school means choice. And so basically parents can vote with their feet. That's the first thing I would say is basically get to like the old-fashioned boycott. If I don't like what's going on, articulate my views, and then bye-bye, I'm going to go look for another place. I would caution the board to not necessarily get entangled in the actual curriculum itself. I think you want to think about what role do you want to play. But I think that it's important to hear those parents and to urge them, probably first and foremost, that really they are the customers. They're the ones who really should be addressing this with their board and telling them if we don't like this and if we don't like it, you change it or we're out of here. That's actually where I would start.
I would second Senator Romero's comments. I do think that, you know, each charter school, the charter school petitioners have the opportunity to offer the program that they believe will provide an opportunity or serve a particular community. And I do think that the law in California provides them a lot of latitude in terms of how they, you know, what curriculum they can use. Charter schools don't have to use the state adopted curriculum. They have flexibility to use alternative curriculums, provided that they can demonstrate the academic results, you know, on the assessments. And as Senator Romero said, just because this board approves a particular charter school that has a particular curriculum, that doesn't mean any student or parent has to choose to go there. They just don't need to choose that school. They go to their neighborhood school or they go to another charter school. There's no in fact, the Charter School Act is very clear. No parent or student can be forced to attend a charter school. It's their choice. It's what the parent or their guardian chooses, and it's what serves that student the best.
Lance, what do you think about this situation?
Well, I think that one of the things to consider, and I agree with both what Ricardo said and what Senator Romero said. Yes, I mean, it is choice. One of the things, though, that I think a board like you would consider is that, I mean, think about cases that have involved charter schools with woke programming, CRT type of curricula or influence curricula, and whether those schools doing exercises in those classes mandatory, and so that you cannot opt out of them. I mean, if you think about, for example, a case that's going on right now involving a woman in Las Vegas, African-American woman named Gabs Clark, who has sued in federal court a charter school in Las Vegas for requiring a course that is basically a CRT course that has a lot of requirements for students to engage in without the ability to opt out. And so she sued the school because her child refused to engage in those activities. The school denied that son of hers a diploma. And because of that, she sued in federal court. And a judge in that case, at least preliminarily, said that the parent was likely to win on the merits. The school then gave the son a diploma, but that had screwed up all of the college application process, et cetera. And so that mother is continuing to sue. And so I think those are the kinds of considerations too, when Gloria had said, you've got to look in the weeds on some of this stuff. And so it's not just like the philosophy of the school, but what exactly are they requiring in the school?
How much time do I have left?
None.
Thanks for asking. Maybe somebody else will cede time to you before we're done here. Trustee Valdez.
Senator Romero and Attorney Soto, I want to follow up on this exact point. We clearly have a charter school that's coming back on October 5th, and we're getting a lot of negative feedback from the parents. And I can tell your recommendation is, well, walk with your feet, right? Which is essentially an economics argument. I fully believe in that. But on the flip side of that, we have parents who are complaining, and it looks like the school just isn't listening. They're not minding their customers. Would this board not be turning our backs on those parents by simply saying, walk with your feet? And honestly, I just want to open up that dialogue again.
Good question.
Let me have you go for, you're the lawyer. I just wrote laws, that's all.
I did want to just say that I'm familiar with the case that Professor Izumi raised. In that case, I think a really important fact is that the curriculum that was instituted was after the student started that school. So the parent and the student, he was attending the school, and then that additional change in the curriculum occurred, and that's part of the issue in that case. Again, I think it's important, obviously, to listen to parents and students in terms of how they're feeling about a particular program, model, or curriculum. But again, charter schools are independently operated from the traditional public school system. They have the flexibility to offer a curriculum that they believe will address.
But Mr. Soto, don't we have the authority as this board to comment on their charter?
Oh, yes,
Perhaps limited if we don't like the curriculum?
Well, it's, and this is, we have this, I'm a lawyer, I support our charter schools, and this argument can be made on both sides. The law is very specific, and this is one of the things we've always stressed with authorizers is you have very specific findings that you have to make in order to be able to deny a charter. Charter schools are supposed to be part of the educational system within the California K system. They're encouraged. And unless you make very specific findings, and they're enumerated in the act, that justify a denial, you're not supposed, a governing board is not supposed to deny that charter. I believe that charter schools provide choices, and not every parent will choose a particular school to send their child. In the end, charter schools are accountable for academic outcomes. I think the big limitation, the overriding limitation is obviously this board could deny a charter if it violates the law, if it's discriminating, if it violates a particular constitutional right. But other than that, I mean, if the program is sound and the charter meets all the elements of the petition, the law, then, and I would say this to a school district also, then the school district and this board should be approving the charter.
The next question I have is, well, just a mention. The night I was appointed, I said I was going to start walking charter schools and public schools in Orange County, and I have done that. And boy, have a lot of people taken me up on that offer. I wanted to just make a comment and then a quick question. The comment I have is about a charter school that I walked a few weeks ago. It was called Scholarship Prep, 59% Latino. It's in my district. The suspension rate is 0. The expulsion rate is 0. The attendance rate is 96.6. I walked the school with the executive director, Jason Watts, and as I got to one of the back rooms, I saw there were laundry machines, dryers in the back. And I just very casually asked the executive director what they were for. And he told me that fully 20% of the students enrolled in that school are either homeless or in foster homes, and they actually provide laundry services for their school. So I wanted to mention that just as a follow-up. That is, I mean, that's happening in my district, and I thought that was a very powerful thing for me to hear about the good work that they are doing. The other thing, and here's going back to my question, facilities procurement of the charter schools is clearly a significant issue. All the charter schools are telling me the same thing. They can't get the right facility or they can't work through the local council. So question to the politicians in the room, how can this board help the charter schools work through the local councils to get the facilities that they need?
It's only one politician I see out here. We have a former politician.
So how can you work through local council to get the facilities that you need? That's the question.
What can we do to support the charter schools getting through the local councils and the red tape?
Councils, I see.
Because it seems to be like a
I
local.
mobilize parents. That's the number one way to do it. That's the most powerful tool. We have an issue like this going on actually in one of the counties I represent with a very popular charter school, has a huge waiting list, and they're having difficulty procuring the facility that they need. But if you're talking about, approvals that you need from a board of supervisors or a city council, these are elected bodies that are going to have overlapping constituencies with you. And so if you mobilize enough parents, then, that'll have an impact. And, when we're talking about charters that are serving a lot of families, it's not that hard to do because they will stand up and fight in order to, allow their child to continue getting the education that they think is right for them. So, there's a lot of probably better advice that maybe you could give from kind of a legal perspective as to how to, navigate the process. But I think that when you have that kind of leverage, political leverage, that will, tend to make the decision makers look at things a little differently.
Thank you, Assemblymember. You're out of time, so I'm going to time you, Vice President Shaw. So you're up now.
I started myself.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. Well, I was thinking about some of the misnomers. My sister-in-law is a teacher at a charter school. She's a member of the California Teachers Association. So I think that is, I'm glad we mentioned that there's an idea that teachers at a charter school are not necessarily in the teachers union. Do any of you know what the percentage is that are in the teachers union?
We estimate about 40% might be unionized in charter schools.
So I bet that's
And it's higher among teachers and certificated staff than the non-certificated. That's a lower percentage, probably closer to 20% or so.
okay. See, I bet that's surprising to people. I think another thing I hear from critics of charter schools that I thought I would like to try to clear up, if at all possible. There seems to be a notion that charter schools get open and it's a for-profit, it's a money-making opportunity for somebody. Somebody's getting rich. Someone's lining their pockets. So, well, can we speak to that a little bit? Who's getting rich out there by opening a charter school? The lawyers. It's the lawyers.
Yeah, I can address that. Actually, a few years ago, the legislature adopted a law that stated that every charter school has to it can either be run by a school district, so school districts have their own charter schools, or it has to be operated by a nonprofit public benefit corporation, and it has to be operated it can't be operated by a for-profit organization. I just would want to say, prior to that law, the vast majority of charter schools in California were not run for profit. It was less than 10 schools in the state of California may have been operated at under a for-profit kind of structure. And we're talking about over 1,200 charter schools in California. So the law was adopted just to kind of reinforce what the existing reality was.
Thank you for that.
Can I add to that, though, but we have seen some examples, and I'd say some scandals in Southern California, for example, where there have been questions, including the prompting of district attorneys looking into this, where you have sort of a backroom shell organization and these directorates, people, family, et cetera. So I don't think it's as clean. And that is something that I think has caused a lot of concern, and it does, rightfully so, raise the issue of, all charters are not necessarily pure and free. So I think that's something. I think also, too, this board has looked at salary compensation of, for example, the elected superintendent. That's also been an issue of some criticism. I'm going to be the first to acknowledge this as well, too, in terms of what are the salaries of executives in, especially some of the larger charter networks. So I think those are issues that could be looked at, that do come up, and that you might take a look at as well. There's also been concerns that I've raised in the past about outside employment contracts. If you're working here, then are you able to run the gig that I had talked about before, in terms of where you're suddenly now brokering, writing petitions, doing other charter stuff. So I think there is a bit of a world there that's a bit messy. I have concerns about it, and it might be something that you might want to take a look at, because at some point it's going to blow up, I think.
Thank you. Real quickly, I know I'm going to be low on time, but I've thought about, as we've had charter schools kind of getting started, there seems to be that initial growing pain and getting their financing in order. If we could quickly suspend our disbelief, what would be the ideal way of financing and getting their financing in order as a school were to get started? What would be the ideal scenario there? Maybe we could even advocate it for it at the state level, but just what would be? I don't know, because I'm not sure that the current model or the current system is ideal, or maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, I would jump again in the weeds over here too, but sort of that bridge funding. I mean, we get the petition approved, but for example, Explore Academy, starting now, we will not see a check coming in from the state till maybe next October. In the meantime, there's all this stuff we've had to put up, basically out of pocket, et cetera. You have to look for donors, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But, and again, too, there is a niche market there as well, too, that is jumped in at rather exorbitant interest rates to say, basically, almost payday lenders for the charter industry to say, we will give you this amount, but you give yourself basically your firstborn child. And so, but I think if we could figure out the niche funding, I don't think Sacramento is going to change that, quite frankly. There's no reason for them to do it, but you're sort of on your own. So looking for, again, to, if there's some way that within a county, maybe to try to find, business people, et cetera, philanthropists to kind of put together some kind of a fund. I think a fair interest rate, that's appropriate, but some of the gouging really hurts people. I saw you thinking about this as well. Do you want to speak up on this?
No, I haven't really looked into that, but thank you.
I did just want to add on that. I agree with Senator Romero. So when the pandemic first hit, there was a lot of concern that we would see school funding decline, and there were in fact deferrals for that first year, which impacted both traditional schools and charter schools. And the California School Finance Authority developed a program to kind of provide some funding in the interim at low interest rates to get all schools, including charter schools, through that period of deferrals with low financing rates. But the counties can do that also. So there are opportunities for county offices of education, for county boards to provide that kind of financing to public school districts and charter schools. And I think it requires you working with the county treasurer to set those up. So those are other ways that you might be able to do it.
Terrific. Thank you. We shall move on to our final trustee, President. Would you please take the mic?
I would be happy to. Thank you. And given all that we are learning today, I want to really thank the audience and the parents and the charter school leaders who've taken the time to come here tonight. You all are really in the front lines of this fight, and listening to all the hurdles that charter schools have to deal with to take that next step and to either be created or be renewed. I mean, it takes Herculean efforts. And so we really appreciate all the work you guys do in that regard. My first question is to Dr. Izumi. I'm very curious about your results in your newest book about Zoom school. There's some misconceptions. We know that the research that I know about it is it really hurt K-12 students particularly the youngest. The younger kids were really hurt and are very far behind. And there was also some disparities in terms of socioeconomic status, in terms of the lagging, being behind relative to higher ed. But you're the real expert. You have the newest research in that regard. And what is it that charter schools did and were able to pivot? And what were some good models of that? And what were some models that we could see for improvement? Hopefully we never have to go there again. Mm-hmm. But I'd like to hear what your findings said.
Well, actually, so my findings go over several of my books. I actually had done a book on this issue of, for example, blended learning, which is actually, part computer-assisted learning, also with traditional, bricks and mortar learning. And one of the problems that regular public schools had, and this is before the pandemic, is that their teachers were not trained. And so I interviewed a teacher who had actually written a book on this blended learning teaching methodology, and she actually taught at Windsor High School in Sonoma County. And I asked her, well, in your school, what percentage of the teachers there are able to teach using this computer-assisted learning technique or instructional technique? And she said, we're lucky if we have 5%. So when you think about that, right, and then you have to go to a situation where a lot of technology may be having to use through Zoom schools. The teachers actually don't know how to do that. In fact, I had one parent who told me that their 12-year-old, this is at the very start when they were starting to do Zoom classes, went onto a Zoom class early. It was just her and the teacher. The teacher then asked her, "Oh, I'm so glad that you're on early. Could you tell me how to operate this?" And so so if you think about that, right, and it's unsurprising that the regular public schools will be ineffective in delivering this education through that type of technology, which they're not used to using. Secondly, I think that what you mentioned about the charter schools pivoting, I think several of the folks here on our panel have mentioned this about how, I think Assemblyman Kiley mentioned about the ability of charter schools to pivot. And one of the reasons they were able to pivot quicker is because actually a lot of them were using technology as the basis for their instructional program. So if you have, and one of the schools that I profile in my book, Choosing Diversity, is a place called Design Tech High School, which is actually based on the Oracle corporate campus in Redwood City. And they already had a model that used a lot of technology in the delivery of their education services. And so when the pandemic hit, they were really in a position so that they were able to turn the switch on, basically. And so and that ability of a school like that to do that was not just unique to that school. You saw in the research that came out in the months following the start of the pandemic, like the University of Washington at Bothell came out with a study that looked at hundreds of school districts versus dozens of different charter school networks to see how did they pivot, to this different environment. And it showed that, unfortunately, the regular public schools were almost wholly ineffective in pivoting, whereas the charter school networks were much more effective in doing it because a lot of their schools were already using that type of technology to begin with.
So I'm hearing innovation, innovation, innovation.
That's
My
right.
last question is, I had the opportunity to have a dinner with Betsy DeVos, the former Secretary of Education, and I was wondering if you were in my shoes, what would be your top 3 questions or priorities that you would want to discuss with her? Go.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. I'm now looking to potentially be involved at the federal level, and that's a very different. Thank you. A very different sort of educational environment, I guess, than the state level. Because education really is not a federal issue, or at least it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be that much of a state issue, in my opinion, either. I mean, that's kind of the idea of charters, is that that's the most local level of control you can have, is at the actual level of the school site. And vesting as much discretion there as possible produces the best outcomes. So I think I'm one of the people who has looked upon the growing role of the Department of Education warily. And I think that Secretary DeVos probably was of a similar mind in a lot of the things that she wanted to do. I do think that there are unfortunately some of the threats to good education policy have in fact come from the federal government of late. You had the Attorney General of the United States targeting parents, likening them to domestic terrorists. You have had the current administration that has actually deprioritized funding for charter schools. So I think that, I guess you asked for 3 things, and I'm giving you kind of a rambling answer. But I would maybe summarize them as, number 1, limiting the encroachment of the federal government on local discretion. Number 2, to the extent that the federal government is involved, using its influence to promote charter schools and other, elements of school choice. And if I had to pick a third, I don't know. I think those 2 about cover it.
Okay, maybe somebody else has a third. Yes.
Let me just say that I actually just a few weeks ago interviewed former Secretary DeVos on a webinar that the Pacific Research Institute sponsored. So I've had an opportunity to talk with her. I mean, if I were you, and especially given the subject of tonight's forum, the federal government under the Biden administration has, implemented some very onerous charter school regulations. And so I'd ask her about that. I'd also ask her about the amount of federal COVID dollars that were supposed to be going to public schools to, a lot of it was supposed to help address the learning loss issue that resulted because of the school closures. Most of that money still hasn't been spent. The money that has been spent, for the most part, has been spent on status quo programs that have done nothing to improve the learning of kids, and certainly not to bridge any gaps. And thirdly, I think that given the fact that you have a large amount of that COVID dollars from the federal government that have not been spent, why isn't that money being backpacked, for example, onto kids so that they can go to, the private tutors or wherever they can get a service that would better meet their needs, especially given the fact that they've lost so much learning during the last 2 years?
Very good, thank you. Oh,
I have one
Walter,
thing.
yes.
I would say with respect to funding, what I think should never occur is that funding should depend on the local tax base. The problem with funding depending on the local tax base is because if it depends on the local tax base, then that will determine the schools with local tax bases that are high are going to get more money. The schools with less are going to get less. To me, it seems probably county level is probably the best way to allocate the funds. And I say that'd be across the board, whether it be a charter or a public school. The funding should go with the child. The funding should go with the student, right? So if you've got a charter school, they get their funding. A public school gets the same level of funding. But it should never be a case where your zip code, as we've talked about all night, it should never be the case that your zip code determines the quality of your education.
Can I throw in a couple of questions? Thursday, I'm going to be involved with the Manhattan Institute on a roundtable on looking at religious schools and funding. So you were, oh my God, so now, okay, the two of us are going to be there. So I think, and I'm a Democrat. I'm a Democrat who believes in opportunity scholarships, dare I even say vouchers as well, too. I believe in what is best for the child, a wide variety overall. But I would be interested in hearing her thoughts now that she's out of the big bubble in Washington, D.C., about means by which there can be, even again, in the private sector, the quote unquote opportunity scholarships to basically identify children in low income, failing schools, and to basically provide these scholarships for them to go into a charter or religious school or something else. A fascinating program in Denver that I toured some years ago. So that's one thing. Second thing is, I would ask her if she would be willing to come out to Orange County and meet with us. So
Yes,
that'd
I'm
be the
gonna ask
second
that.
question.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Sparks, and thank you, panelists, for some interesting and thought-provoking answers. We're at the time in our program where we're going to take a 15-minute break so you can get your blood circulating again and take care of anything else that needs to circulate. And we'll be back here at let's call it 8:15.
Perfect.
12 minutes, just as they had in the beginning, to open. We're going to start from my left to right. Since Kevin Kiley is not here, we'll start with Ricardo Soto and then move on, and we'll insert the assembly member when he gets back in here. Start the timer. You got 12 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much. Again, I just want to thank the County Board of Education for the opportunity to speak tonight. I do want to just begin first my closing remarks by highlighting some of the recent polling that I know that Board President Sparks mentioned during the press conference, but CCSA recently conducted a poll of parents in California concerning charter schools and education in California. And what we learned, and this has been reinforced by other polls that have been done more recently, including by USC, is that California voters have become increasingly skeptical about public education in California, and that a majority of parents want major change, more influence, and more public school choices for their children. Parents who want major change and more influence are strong supporters of charter schools. I know that Board President Sparks said that over 70% of parents support charter schools in California, and we consistently see this across the board. What the numbers tell us is that 55% of California voters favor charter schools. That's up 8% from 2020. 70% of parents support charter schools. 59% of parents want major changes in public education. 65% of parents say that they have too little influence over California public schools. And 72% of parents say that they want more choices, more public school choices. So for all these reasons, the work that you're doing here in Orange County is critical to ensuring that not only are the demands of parents and the needs for students being met, but that also that you're promoting innovation and options for families and students so that they can be successful. And there's some really important ways, and I'll be very brief. In fact, I won't take up my whole 12 minutes, in terms of like the areas, the critical areas where this board can be supporting policies to support charter schools. First, facilities. As was mentioned, facilities remains the major obstacle for charter schools in operating. They, unlike the traditional school system, their facilities have to come out of any costs associated with their facilities usually comes out of their general fund budget. They don't have a separate facility budget for their funding, and they can't go to voters to get additional funding at very low cost for their charter schools. So coming up with solutions, partnering with organizations, maybe even with other public agencies to make facilities available to charter schools is a real critical way that this board can support charter school growth. I know that board member Shaw mentioned, that city councils, how do you think about working with city councils? And that's a really important question because unlike school districts, which have the authority to waive zoning requirements in order to purchase a property and to build a school, charter schools have to comply with local zoning requirements, and they have to comply with the California building code. And in some cases, that can really constrain and limit the options in terms of where they can serve their students. Too often, charter schools are targeting communities that are underserved with their public school options. And sadly, these communities also have some challenges from a land use perspective, from an environmental perspective. And charter schools are constrained by those, even though they want to go in and serve these communities that are underserved. They're limited by city councils and by local zoning ordinances. Working with those cities and counties that have these ordinances to provide some preferences for charter school programs would be a real big way of supporting charter schools. And then finally, even funding, if there are ways that you can encourage local school districts to include charter schools in their bond measures. I live in San Diego County. The San Diego Unified School District is a real role model in terms of how to support charter schools. They have another bond on their on the November ballot. If that bond passes, charter schools will have been guaranteed more than $1 billion towards their charter school facilities in San Diego, and that's more than the state has ever provided to charter schools. One school district, and that's because there's a partnership between charter schools and the school district in including charter schools in their bond measures. That can be a real important way of encouraging local districts here. Funding, outside of the facility funding, funding is a big issue for charter schools. State Senator Romero mentioned how, they're trying to start their school, and, they're essentially trying to borrow to be able to, kick off with the initial cost. Thinking of ways, as Board Member Shaw mentioned, about establishing financing locally to support charter schools so that they can open with low amounts of debt and can be guaranteed that they can get started on the right, with the right opening is critical. Thinking of how you can encourage your state officials to look at state options to also do this. The California the California School Finance Authority it helps not only traditional school districts but also charter schools in looking at their financing options, and just encouraging local legislators to think of programs that they can propose in legislation for the CSFA would go a long way to helping charter schools also have the resources, the financial resources that they need to open. And then lastly, thinking of not encouraging overreach and onerous oversight of charter schools. From my perspective, the Charter School Act is self-executing. It's got everything you need in there in order to ensure that charter schools are proposing sound programs to meet their communities and the children's needs. And the oversight is also in there. There are provisions around what kind of oversight and reports charter schools need to do. And really the requirements of school districts, county boards, in some cases, county offices of education, of MOUs and additional language that must be embedded into the charter school to essentially require them to be more compliance-oriented than outcomes-oriented is a way of undermining the charter school model. So looking at pulling back if necessary as a county board or through the county office is another way to foster innovation, flexibility, and autonomy so that charter schools can meet their needs. The work that this board is doing is so important. You can set a model for the rest of the state in terms of what good authorizing looks like and what good oversight looks like, at the same time encouraging innovation and ensuring that students are receiving high-quality programs. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight.
Thank you, Ricardo. Before Assemblymember Kiley makes his concluding remarks, President Sparks had a comment, important notice.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. We do have an option now. Some people want to give public comment, and at the very beginning we made the announcement, but then some people came in late that do want to give public comment. So if you do want to give public comment, we will take that at the end of our session tonight, and we have a couple cards already, but for anybody else who wants to submit a public comment card, please just bring it up here, and we'll handle that after the end of our event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll ask Assemblymember Kiley to make his concluding remarks.
Well, thanks so much for the chance to be here. This has been a really fantastic discussion, and I've learned a lot as well from my fellow panelists here and the members of the board. And I would just say, as as a concluding remark, that please keep doing what you're doing. Continue to lead by example. As we just heard, you can be a model for the entire state. And can work with other county boards of education as well to try to, show them what you're doing and how they can step into that role of being an effective authorizer to, maximize the potential for chartering and quality education options within their jurisdiction. I guess, maybe a second point is I think that there's this tremendous constituency of charter school parents throughout California that we can do more to do outreach to in order to, be a real counterweight to the influence of the interests that lie on the other side of some of these battles. And I know that CCSA and other charter school groups have done good work there. But how many charters are there in Orange County now? Is it
35.
35? So you have lots and lots of charter school families just here in this county, which can be an army of sort of spokespeople for the benefits of charter schools, and how actually the existence of charter schools is good even for families that don't utilize charter schools, because this has been shown time and again that when there is some level of choice, it actually kind of lifts all boats. Because it changes the incentives from the perspective of the district, and has a number of salutary effects. So I think that that's a second sort of point, is that especially at this time when there's a level of sort of engagement on the part of parents and citizens on issues of education, there's really an opportunity to strengthen that grassroots coalition. So that it'll be there to grow and to be deployed as necessary in the years ahead. But I am pretty excited actually about some of the things that are going on across the state right now. And when I see boards like this one stepping up and taking and I know that you've had to deal with a lot because of the choices that you've made to take a stand and to do what's right for your community and what's right for kids and what's right for parents. That takes an extraordinary amount of courage, and I know that it's not easy. And so thank you for what you have done. It's done, and I'm sure that there are countless people in this county who are very appreciative.
Thank you.
Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, Assembly Member. Senator Romero, your concluding remarks.
Thank you so much once again for hosting this forum, and again too for really, I really enjoyed and learned from the other panelists. It really is quite distinguished, and I look forward to the public comment. I would emphasize, when we talk about charter schools, it's a movement. You talked about the Army you talked about the anniversary tomorrow. And I think for a lot of us, we've seen it. Senator Huff, you and I have seen it in the Capitol, along with Assemblymember Kiley, the battles that go on under the dome. Here in this very building, you've seen it as board members as well, in terms of trying to stand up for charters. I've been in front of other authorizing agencies as well, and with other charters. And it is a battle, it's constant. But, when you're talking about your kids' education, it is, the fight. It's worth fighting for. So I think it's important to always think about it as a movement, and we are only 30, so wow, that's pretty good, I think. I'm not going to reiterate some of the points that were emphasized, but I stand by, what I've said and what others, but I think a lot of it is fiscal, really holding the accountability, authorizing the charter, but then holding the charter accountable. And it is about student achievement. It is about outcome. It is about ultimately how well does that student fare. I do want to emphasize as well too, to really think about eliminating that administrative bureaucracy that has crept in at all levels of the chartering process. And I think this board could really be quite profound in standing up to saying we're getting rid of all this stuff, because it does become stuff that you've got to deal with and pay a lot of money for overall. And then finally, I would just say as well too that, while I'm a strong advocate for charters, it is not the only answer. It's just one in the toolbox. And Senator Huff, you recall when we did our, I think it was the crowning piece of legislation, the Parent Empowerment Act of 2010. It provided for actually a couple of options. And one of them was, of course, open enrollment overall. And we were able to get through, even in a very difficult situation, for low-income parents to be able to move out of, we had to identify the lowest performing schools in California. We had 1,000. And so to be able to identify these and for parents to be able to opt out to another district, a higher performing district, or to another charter school. And a lot of parents just don't know. They don't know what the laws are. They don't know what's available. I would even submit to you that probably most parents still have no idea what a charter school even is. So there's a lot of education that has to take place in using some of these other tools. You know, under the Parent Trigger Act as well too, it's possible to convert a failing school into a charter. So you don't have to go through the chartering process traditionally, although we've seen a lot of retaliation and fight back there as well. I'm a strong advocate for homeschooling as well. I'm a strong advocate for looking at religious schools. I believe it's parents' choice. My child, my choice. And what works for me may not work for you. So when I look at public education, one thing that this board can really do is really help, you know, as we say, reimagine public education and to really emphasize that the public dollar, the taxpayer dollar, it's public education if that taxpayer dollar goes with the kid. In higher education, we allow, you know, Pell Grants, et cetera, to be used at private universities, and nobody has a heart attack over that. So again, to looking at this again, to how do we enable parents to take those dollars and to go to the school of their choice? I think that's something that's going to be very important. And then ultimately, you know, you stand for office, you have to go through and face at the local level the fight backs for standing up for parents. You know, I think Senator Huff, myself, you know, some member Kylie, we could probably show you our battle wounds, right? But it's worth the fight. And I just encourage you to keep doing that and to just always, you know, remember the why you're in the movement after all. And so thank you for inviting me to participate.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Romero. And Walter Myers, your closing comments?
Thank you. I'd like to take the next few minutes to highlight the current status of K-12 education in California, because I think we should all know what's at stake here. The numbers are sobering and truly indicate there needs to be dramatic change in K-12 education. According to the recent Heritage Foundation Education Freedom Report Card, California ranks 29th overall among the 50 states in the District of Columbia, 31st in school choice, 36th in regulatory freedom, and 36th in spending. At least California scores high in transparency. It's 14th. But while California's Governor Newsom has only bad things to say about Florida, guess who ranks number one? Florida's number one, followed closely by Arizona and Idaho in second and third. Now, according to EdSource, which is a California organization that provides information, research, and analysis to the public with the goal of enhancing learning success, according to their website, California does little to ensure that all children can read by third grade. EdSource notes that California fourth graders trail the nation in reading, and half of its third graders, including 2/3 of Black students and 61% of Latino students, do not read at grade level. Other states such as Mississippi, North Carolina, Florida, Connecticut, Colorado, Virginia, and New York City have adopted comprehensive plans to ensure that all students can read by third grade. K-2 is critical to establishing a foundation for later school years. And without critical reading skills, students are at a huge disadvantage when they fall down at those early ages. Regarding public school standardized test scores in California, in 2019, about 51% of the students who took the exam administered to high school juniors and students in grades 3 through 8 had mastered the state's reading standards. In math, about 40% of students who took the exam earned the passing score. What's particularly sobering about this statistic is that Black and Latino students significantly trail white and Asian American students in meeting the state's reading and math standards. In 2019, 77% of Asian students and 65% of white students met state reading standards, while 41% of Latino students and 33% of Black students met state reading standards. In 2019, 70% of Asian students and 55% of white students met state math standards, while only 28% of Latino students and 20% of Black students met state math standards. Now, it's argued that what is driving these disparities in California is poverty as a primary cause, as opposed to racial composition. But this view is challenged when looking at the results of charter schools in New York City. 23 of the top 30 schools in New York in 2019 were charter schools. These charter schools are made up of more than 80% Black and Latino students. The Success Academy has 47 schools in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens boroughs of New York City. The Success Academy in Harlem is the highest performing free public charter school network in New York City, rated top 1% in both math and English among all schools, not some, all schools in New York, which is an incredible achievement. Children across all demographics, racial and economic, including homeless, are achieving outstanding results in New York City charter schools. Charter schools demonstrate that disadvantaged economic backgrounds can indeed be overcome, even with enrollment dominated by low-income minorities, thus closing the Black-white education gap. So there's much that California can learn in knowing that highly segregated schools are not a recipe for low student achievement. Regardless of the racial makeup of a school or the presence of poverty, academic achievement, as noted by the Success Academy itself, is more about the environment in which students learn, teachers who are passionate about teaching, a focus on continued teacher improvement, active partnering with parents, and innovations in effective classroom management that make all the difference. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Walter, and providing cleanup for the panelists is Lance Izumi. I know you're up to the task.
Well, I appreciate that, Senator Huff. Again, thank you very much to all the members of the board for inviting all of us here today. Especially personally want to thank my good friend Mary Barkey, who was the one who extended the invitation to me to participate in tonight's forum, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your friendship, Mary. What I wanted to do, and actually it's almost as if Walter and I, thought this through about how to end this event, is, Walter talked about the improvement or the success of these Success Academy charter schools in New York City, and how they were serving a very underprivileged group of kids, and yet they're able to do so much with them. Now, I want to emphasize that what Success Academy has been able to achieve in New York City is not limited to New York City in terms of charter schools. And this is what I want to make sure that we put in the official record for this forum, is that we've been talking a lot tonight about the improvement of student achievement because of charter schools. And I think it's important to be able to actually cite actual data that shows that type of improvement, and instead of just talking about it anecdotally. So if you look for one of the biggest studies that most recently has been done on charter schools versus regular public schools in terms of student achievement was done by Harvard University. Harvard came out with a study in 2020 that tracks students from 2005 to 2017, so a dozen years. And they compared the performance of charter school students with regular public school students. And what they found was that they saw a larger increase in student achievement for students at charter schools than for students at district schools. Well, how large an increase? Half a year's improvement for charter school students versus regular public school students. And it was even more pronounced in certain demographic groups. So Walter was talking about African Americans and their improvement at Success Academy. For African American 8th grade charter schools now around the country in this national sample from Harvard, they found that the average math scores improved by an amount which was 4 times larger than students attending the regular district schools. In reading, the average scores for African American charter 8th graders improved by an amount twice those of students attending the regular district schools. And so, given the importance of closing the Black-white test gap, this much steeper upward trend at charter schools is particularly meaningful, and it's a phenomenon that occurs across the country. And if you look aside from race, and if you look at income categories, so low-income kids around the country, what you find is that 8th grade charter school students in the lowest socioeconomic quartile made more progress in reading and math from 2005 to 2017 with a equivalent of an additional half year of learning. So those are really important statistics. Those aren't just tweaks at the margin. When you're learning more, a half a year's worth of learning more simply because you went to a charter school, I mean, that makes what we're talking about here tonight so much more important. And I think one of the most important findings of this Harvard study was that when they looked at how do you explain this improvement at the charter schools, I mean, could it be this factor or that factor? When they held constant various factors, what they found was that the improved teaching and learning environments in the charter sector account for most, if not all, of the improvement not explained by background characteristics. So it's what's going on in the charter schools that is making that difference. And so I think that's, one of the important things we've got to take from tonight is that what you're doing here in terms of encouraging good charter schools to be established in Orange County is going to have this type of effect for the students in this county. I also think there's one last thing I'd like to mention too, though, is that, I work for a think tank. So, I like research, I like data, that sort of thing. And there's a lot we can prove with that and a lot of arguments that we can use that data to support. But I think it's also important to realize that when it comes to charter schools, the reason why we support charter schools is not only because of statistics like I just quoted. It's also because charter schools give parents the freedom to choose the values which they want their children to be instructed with and to be influenced by. So Kevin Kiley earlier today mentioned a charter school called John Adams Academy, which is in his district. It's a classical education charter school. When I was writing my book, Choosing Diversity, I happened to run into Kevin near the state capitol, and he told me, and I told him what book I was writing about charter schools, and he said, well, have you gone to John Adams Academy? And I said, well, no, I haven't even heard of it. He says, you got to go. Before you finish your book, you have got to go to that school. So I said, okay, you're the assemblyman, I'm going to go. So I went, and I couldn't believe it. That school moved me so much. It has good academics, but it moved me in terms of the values I hold dear. Those were the values that were being promoted by this school. If you look at the mission statement of the school, it said that John Adams is about restoring America's heritage by developing servant leaders and defenders of the principle of freedom for which the founders pledged their lives, fortune, and sacred honor. And this school is located in an area which is supposed to have good public schools, regular public schools. And yet, when this school had an initial meeting for parents to inquire about whether they wanted to go to this school or not, the people who established this school thought that they might have a couple dozen people show up. Turned out they had 1,000 people who showed up. In fact, there are so many people who showed up at that founding meeting of this school that there was a traffic jam that went from the parking lot of that school all the way out to the exit on Interstate 80. The police had to be called in order to clear up this traffic. But what's going on here? And so the reason why those parents lined up like that to get to this school, to hear about this school, is because they were dissatisfied with what was happening in the regular public schools. And it may not have been the academics. It may have been a lot of other things that were going on that they were dissatisfied. And John Adams Academy gave them a choice of where they wanted to place their kids based upon the values that they and their family hold dear. And I think that we have to look at charter schools in both ways, both in terms of the academics, the student achievement, the improvement in performance, but we also have to look as to what other almost intangible things that they bring to the table as well. And so with that, I want to thank you again and thank all my fellow panelists here who have done such a great job in making the case for good charter schools in California.
Thank you, Lance. You did a credit to your panelists by doing an excellent cleanup. And they, you know, let's give all of our panelists another round of applause. And President Sparks, I hope that you certainly assembled a good panel tonight with a lot of depth of experience, knowledge, and capabilities. And hopefully your board has learned from this and can reach back on some of the things you heard tonight and guide you as you make policy for Orange County. You're tasked with one of the most important jobs around, the education of our kids. So congratulations. Thanks for letting me be a part of it. I'm going to step off the dais while you take public comments. I've done my duty of public comments. So.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Huff. I just want to give the credit to trustees Barkey and Williams, who actually were the ones that did the heavy lifting in putting this panel together. I've, of course, is very supportive, but these guys are the ones who really deserve all the credit, and thank you all for your hard work. So I'm just blown away with what we've heard tonight. This has been amazing. Let's go ahead and get to our public comment, and then we'll wrap up for tonight. So Tim, who do we have?
Thank you. I will call a name and then the person on deck as well. So we'll start with Cindy, followed by Madison. We'll give them 3 minutes. Okay.
Good evening, board trustees and distinguished guests. Thank you for providing this very informative meeting this evening. I felt compelled to speak because I'm passionate about school choice and also love my charter school, OCCA. And they have been a saving grace for me during the pandemic. When the pandemic initially started back in 2020, I have 4 school-aged kids, and it was difficult for me because I'm also an essential worker, so I was required to go into the office. My kids transitioned to Zoom, and what I saw was happening in public schools was just outrageous. My high school student was being taught things such as CRT. My junior high school student was early sexual education, and he told me when he was coming home from school that he was asked what his pronouns were. And then as far as my elementary school students that were on Zoom at their elementary school, their instruction was reduced from 6 hours in classroom instruction to 2 hours in Zoom. The rest of the time, they were supposed to be independent study. Okay, so I can't do this. And expecting a single mom working full-time, I cannot do this. I was looking at different options, and I'm so fortunate that we found Orange County Classical Academy. It has been a blessing. My kids love it. And just to talk about all the misnomers out there, to dispel the misnomers, I've heard critics say that the parents are a group of cults. That's not true. Okay, we are very supportive of our school. We appreciate our school. We will do anything to support our kids. And just by way of example, approximately a week ago when we experienced the heat wave here, our kids in their lunchtime, they did not have any coverings at their benches. So parents got together and bought pop-up tents for all the kids. We came with our pop-up tents and we, raised it up for all the kids so they could be covered during lunchtime. And that's just the community that we have. We love our school. We will do anything for our kids. The second misnomer I like to dispel is that the charter school, the curriculum is subpar to public school. And as we heard from Mr. Myers, I believe, right there, California education is failing. I think we're number 48 right now out of 50. Okay, so our education standards is failing. OCCA, their test scores beat the state test scores last year. Our English and math scores were above state levels last year. So anyone that says charter school curriculum is failing, they need to go and do the research and look at the state test scores. And more important than the curriculum is that we teach the individual as a whole. We teach the individual about the character and character counts And we have the 7 pillars at OCCA. My kids come home and recite the 7 pillars, and it's more than just the curriculum. It's about integrity, it's about character counts, and it's about the individual as a whole.
Your time is up.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you. I
All
can go on and
right.
on because I'm so passionate
You're on a
about
roll,
it.
though. You're
Thank
doing
you.
great. We're going to have Madison followed by Wendy.
Cindy stole some of my words. I'm not going to lie. So I'm just going to put my phone over there. Not that far. Okay, so my name is Madison. I am a mom of 4 kids. I have 3 of them. One of them is at home. She's little. But 3 of them are at a charter school. I pulled them from typical public school just because I wasn't happy with the things they were getting taught. I felt like it was unnecessary. It was not back to basic learning. They needed to learn how to read. They needed to learn how to do proper math. And Common Core math was not working for our family. My husband's an engineer. He's very smart, and he looked at Common Core and said, my kids aren't doing that. So anyway, fast forward to, or rewind to a couple years ago, I started going to board meetings. And as a mom of 4 kids that's now sending 3 of the 4 so far to charter school, my family, my husband and I, we made the decision I'm now running for board. So I am running for a school board position. Thank you. And I'm crazy. Mr. Kiley, thank you for your endorsement.
Which
In
school
fact,
board?
I'm sorry. Whoa.
Which school board?
Thank you for your endorsement too. Orange Unified School District, just a couple minutes down the road. So this thing's wiggly. So anyway, I'm overwhelmed. I'm excited, but I'm overwhelmed. I'm not a politician. There's nothing political in me except that I'm a mom. And I think school choice, I loved what you said, because I think school choice goes beyond political affiliations. I think the ability to choose where your kids learn best is important. I think that parents should have that right. And I think it's ridiculous that there's so many people that are telling us that our kids can only go to public schools if they want to get funding. I don't understand that. And back to what Cindy was talking about, I actually have the exact statistic. For English language learners, especially at our school, because my kids go to the same school, our CASP ELA standards were at 33% for special ed, while it was below 15% at the California state level. And then which this one blows me away, our exceeding CASP ELA standards for English language learners was 50% at our school and just above 10% in California. So when people say that charter schools don't work or that they are a below standard, statistics don't lie. And I'm not saying it's the only way. I'm saying let parents choose where they send their kids. If it's private school, great. If it's homeschooling, you're crazy, but great. I tried it, not great at it personally, but good for you if you are. If it's a charter school, wonderful. If it's, a typical public school, it's where you want to send your kids. So that's all I had to say. That's all.
Thank you, Madison. We're going to hear Wendy, followed by Michelle.
Did you say me?
Oh, I had Wendy first.
I have 4. I was supposed to change numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I get out of order?
Sorry, let me go to my notes. Okay, hi, I'm Wendy Eklund, homeschool mom and leader in the non-classroom-based charter school community. I appreciate this board and the forum, and thank you for hosting. I just wanted to point out how our non-classroom-based charter schools play a huge role in helping parents take the education of their children back. They are the last public school option for children who are not fully vaccinated. They are an important charter model, and they have been under the most attack by our legislators. Funding to this model was drastically limited during COVID when parents were trying to enroll in this model when schools closed. Legislators also extended the 2-year moratorium on this model for 3 more years. No new non-classroom-based schools can be authorized in California. We must protect and fight for this model. Parents have a legal right to opt out of state testing, but laws punish our schools for parents exercising their right. Charter law was developed to test new methods of education, and we support those strides, but the measure of success is still tying our children to an antiquated model of assessment. We need to explore and support alternative methods of measuring student success. Thank you again.
Thank you. Michelle, followed by Marissa.
Good evening, board. Thank you so much, and welcome our new trustee, Valdez. So nice to meet you. I really appreciate you putting this forum on, but I want to say I think we're preaching to the choir. We all here are here because we believe in charters. We've got an audience we have to reach, and that's the folks that have no idea just what having a choice in education can do to accelerate their own children's learning and make it a positive experience. So what I would love to suggest to you all is that you do this again, maybe twice a year, and then maybe move it to another venue. Maybe a charter school would be happy to host it in one location one year, and maybe a different charter school in another part of the county would host it in another piece. And let's do things like market out towards the library, because parents who care about their kids have their kids. I've seen them in the libraries, and a lot of them don't know what charter schools are. So maybe, you know, we really set up a marketing campaign to reach beyond our own choir here and see if we can't get some more folks out. And I just love this. I'm thankful that you've recorded this, because I'm going to be sending out clips to a lot of people, because there was a lot of good information. And grateful to you panelists. You've all done a great job to help enhance what's going on in the charter world. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And concluding speaker, Marissa.
Hi, thank you to the board, my friend Mary Barkey, and then some of my other friends, Lance, Kevin. You know, charter schools I wish was available when I went through K through 12, because I guess 5th grade through like my sophomore year, mostly my junior high career, was not that great. It's like memories I don't want to remember, because those were years that the public schools, how our teachers were and how the system was, made me want to send myself to a morgue. It was that bad. It was, and mind you, these were schools in my town that had like their cute little blue ribbons, their distinguished schools. But it's like when you talk to a student about the insides of it, it's a little different too, because it's like it could look very beautiful on the outside, but you don't know what's really going on. Like you have the curriculum issues with the woke stuff, CRT stuff like that. That's one thing, and it was very crazy thinking back on it, because it's like we should have quality education. We shouldn't have kids wanting to drop out by the time they reach high school. They shouldn't be going to continuation high schools. They shouldn't be doing stuff like that. They shouldn't be suspended early because of grades and like absences in their K through 12. It doesn't make any sense why we can't have good education in California, and why there's so much prevention for that, and why we rank nearly last on everything in concerns of education. And so as a K through 12 graduate, survivor more like, I talked to some of the high schoolers who are part of like organizations who are like try to advocate for policies to somehow better K through 12, but I talked to them and they're like, oh, we partnered with this group for this policy, and you know, I read through it, I'm like, this is going to make your problem much worse. It really will. And so I think one of the concerns you guys should have in the future is that there's a lot of kids who want to get involved in politics, and so they're going to get swept up by interests that are not so great for their own education and the future education for your kids and your future and your grandkids. And so just be wary about kids and activism as well. And so that's why also we need good public education from charters and our regular public schools as well, so they know what to look out for when they get into the adult world.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to make it clear, Madam President, we'll have this on our website right away. So everyone should be sharing this, and you know, this is a great way to. We had so much good information here. I hope everyone. I want to encourage everyone to, you know, feel free to email, post away, and we can spread the good things that were learned here that way.
And I'll just say, as I wrap up and adjourn the meeting, there's so many wonderful ideas that have emerged today. And, you know, I heard many of you say, I'm not a politician. None of us are politicians either. We stood up because we saw a need in our community, and each of you can do the very same thing. There's so many amazing ideas that came out here, so I appoint each of you to be in charge of your own committee for your own ideas and to be community organizers, and we'll show up. If you organize us and you say, hey, let's do this at this library, let's do this at this high school, let's do this wherever, and you gather us together, we will be there to back you. So I encourage each of you to realize your convictions and stand up. And just showing up today is the first step, right? Just showing up is the first step, as they say. So I really appreciate our speakers. I appreciate you guys as organizers to bring our amazing speakers and my fellow trustees. We have an amazing board, and we're here because of you, the parents who voted us in. So thank you so much, and everyone have a great evening, and I will adjourn the meeting. All right? We'll see you next time.